Okay, close enough. All right, everyone, we'll start with our last presentation for the day. This is going to be a really fun one. We have had panels, of course, for all of our summits, and we've also had panels which we've done through webinars. And one of the panels had to do with AI and emerging technology. And as part of that panel, we get our feedback back. And one of the individuals from that feedback, who everyone said did a great job, the unprompted feedback accordingly, was Jay Walker Smith. So we wanted to invite him
You never
back.
told me that before.
I know, it's confidential. You only get this type of knowledge at the summit itself.
Gotcha.
And so there was a really fun one done on AI. If you haven't seen that out on our YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. So please welcome Walker. Come on up.
Thank you very much.
I hope you got your bag of potato chips.
I'm not sure what I need to have at this point, actually, except be entertaining. So I will just offer one little addendum. So what I want to share with you is a presentation that I deliver to clients a lot, to try and share with them a little bit of our point of view at Kantar about where we think the marketplace is these days. So part of this is to generate business, but this is sort of a soft sales pitch. There's nothing, I'm not talking about Kantar here, but I am talking about some of our ideas and the questions that should be raising for clients as they think about their business. And it so happened that it was perfectly suited for this event. We talk to clients really about some of the macro changes that are occurring in the marketplace. So big things that are kind of affecting macro futures and big changes in consumer trends and things that people are looking for in the marketplace. And I talk about this, or I introduce this in the context of a concept of change. So if there's sort of one word to describe this moment for consumers in the marketplace, it is this idea of change. People really feel like they are living in a very tumultuous moment where everything is up for grabs. And this includes brands, but it includes everything in their lifestyle. So the broader context of this moment for consumers is change. And actually yesterday, I was having an internal conversation about GLP-1s. We do a lot of research on GLP-1s. And the observation was made by someone else, but I'm going to steal it in the future, that GLP-1s, by affecting people's cravings for apparently everything, is forcing people to shop differently. So people are kind of switching from what Daniel Kahneman described as type 1 thinking, just sort of buy things out of habit. And people are actually having to rethink or devote more attention and consideration to the things they're buying in the marketplace. So there apparently, or the hypothesis is, there's a lot more type 2 thinking going on in the marketplace these days among people using GLP-1s, and thus an opportunity for marketers to try and affect behaviors in ways that are traditionally closed off to them because people are just buying out of habit. So I think that's sort of a good little footnote to this sort of idea change, because when we went out in our monitor survey a couple of years after the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021, and we sort of posed a question to consumers about whether they agree or disagree, 8 in 10 consumers, and the way I do statistics, my little joke is that's 100%. 8 in 10 is kind of like everybody, right? Except I often say the 20% who marked the wrong box on the questionnaire. It's like everybody agrees with this statement that the pandemic has shown that there are better alternatives to the old ways of doing things. So there has been this moment in recent memory for consumers where everything was up for grabs and everybody is open to a better way of doing things. And I actually think we see this in many ways besides the consumer marketplace. So sometimes I will share with clients my replotting of an analysis that was published by the Financial Times earlier this year in the wake of all the national elections that were held around the world last year. So as you probably know, we had a record number of national elections last year. And the Financial Times looked at some political data going back to the beginning of the 20th century to assess what happened last year in national elections in developed countries. So the analysis they did was to look at the incumbent governing party in every developed country, going back to the beginning of the 20th century, and to look at the share of vote that party got in a given election compared to the share of vote that party got in the prior election. So to what extent are incumbent parties able to retain public support from election to election? And of course, as you can see, in general, incumbent governing parties don't do such a good job of retaining public support. But last year was unusual even against this baseline in that for the first time ever, every single incumbent governing party in developed nations where there was a national election lost public support. Never 100%. And the average loss of voter share or public support was a record average level of loss of support. So if you just look at politics last year, what you see is that voters around the world said, we're fed up with the status quo. I don't care if it's a left-wing government or a right-wing government. I am more likely to vote against it than ever before. People are saying they want some kind of change, even if it involves breaking the rules. And that's a whole different thing. But PRRI has been sort of tracking that as a sentiment among voters. Are you willing to elect somebody who's going to break the rules for change? And there are a lot of people, in this country at least, who are willing to do that. People are fed up. People are embracing change. People want something different, and changes the environment around them. And I think this begins to help us understand other things that we see in other data. Now, whenever I do this chart, my gray bars showing recessions disappear. So you'll kind of have to take my word for this. But this is the University of Michigan sentiment data going back to the beginning of that tracking in the late 1970s. And this red line is the COVID recession that lasted for 2 months. For some reason, this line always shows up, but the gray bars showing other recessions don't. And this has been consumer sentiment since COVID. Fell off the cliff and has never recovered. And I've marked here, you can't see this either, but this index value of 70, which comes across the chart kind of like here, is a crucial index value because consumer sentiment in the Michigan tracking has been 70 or below by their indexing in the past only during recessions. The only time consumer sentiment has been this low, not in a recession, is today. And that characterizes, I think, the consumer mindset today. It's a recessionary mindset. So for whatever reason, people are feeling very bad about their prospects, irrespective of every other kind of economic indicator that might suggest things are actually pretty good. Consumers feel bad about where they are in their lifestyle situations these days. They feel like something needs to change. They're kind of they're fed up with the status quo. And that's the recessionary mindset that we have among consumers these days. And it is additionally reflected in data about trust. So the Edelman Trust Barometer has been run for 20 years now, and they reported this January that in their tracking last year, the percentage of people worldwide in the 28 countries in which they do tracking, the percentage of people who say that government leaders, business leaders, and media lie to them, say things that they know are false or gross exaggerations, is a record high percentage over their 20 years of tracking. So over the course of this century, trust in all kinds of leaders and institutions has bottomed out. So you got a recessionary mindset, you got a bottoming out of trust, you got people voting against any incumbent government that they can get their hands on around the world. And that's the consumer mindset these days, with 80% of consumers in our monitor data saying, I want a better alternative. And where are they finding this better alternative? In the consumer marketplace, they're finding it in all of these insurgent and small disruptive brands that are coming into every category. And so what I've shown here is just a screenshot taken from a Bain report that actually looks at the share of year-over-year growth accounted for by these insurgent brands. And last year in 2024, it was 40% of the year-over-year growth on average across all consumer packaged goods categories. 40% of growth. These insurgent brands are 5 share brands or less, But in aggregate, they account for 40% of the growth on average in their categories, which is more than double the year-over-year growth they accounted for in the year before. So people are just saying, I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for a new alternative. I'm open to change. And so this goes to the issue of old brands sort of maintaining their presence in the marketplace. It goes to the issue of where established brands should be looking for innovation. It goes to the question of what's the business model that these disruptive brands are using to capture this growth, which is a very different kind of business model that has been used historically, a different kind of introduction model. There's something different going on in the marketplace, and it's all about change. So that's how I kind of introduce this idea of change to clients when we talk about it. And then I say to them, you can take control over this, because there are 10 things that if you pay attention to them, you can create some opportunities for your brands. 5 of these things are just macro trends that are going to roll over you if you don't pay attention to them, but they do create some opportunities. But you can't avoid these things. They're going to affect you one way or the other. And then there are 5 things that can be opportunities for you. They won't necessarily roll over you, but they are available to you as ways in which you can create some new kinds of opportunities for your brands. So 5 things that are going to change brands and 5 things that brands can change for themselves. So let me just show you what I describe to clients as these 5 things that are going to change brands, whether they like it or not. And the first thing that I talk about, and what is perhaps the biggest thing going on in the world today, is volatility. So what you see plotted here is data from something called the World Uncertainty Index, which is an index of uncertainty in local business climates that's maintained by a team of economists who used to be associated with the International Monetary Fund. They do content analysis of analyst reports that are written for 143 countries around the world. And in that content analysis, they're looking for indications of uncertainty in the local business climate. And then they take all of this analysis for these countries and they aggregate it on both a monthly and a quarterly basis into the uncertainty index. So this is the quarterly index, the World Uncertainty Index, and the yellow line here is the turn of the century. So what you see here most dramatically, just visually, is a real change in the amount of volatility or these swings and uncertainty that began to occur after the turn of the century. In fact, during the financial crisis, Ben Bernanke popularized the phrase, the Great Moderation, in which he said, yeah, we've had disruptions in the past, but we have been able to manage them better because we've used advances in monetary policy to kind of run the global economy. So sure, there was some variation, some volatility in business climate and business uncertainty prior to the turn of the century, but all of that kind of went away after the turn of the century. And so what we've been living through are these kind of wider ranging and more frequent swings in the amount of uncertainty or volatility in the broader business climate. And oftentimes, just as a way of illustrating that, and I'll do it here, I kind of read my laundry list of all the unprecedented and sort of really disruptive things that have occurred in this century that we really haven't seen anything like in the past. So if we just kind of start at 2000, we'll remember it opened with Y2K, right? So we weren't supposed to see any of this to begin with, but we did live through Y2K, and we lived through Y2K only to run into the dot-com bust, and then a wave of global terrorism, 9/11, 7/7. The iPhone was launched at the same time as the financial crisis, and both of those were game changers. The iPhone may be the biggest technological innovation in history. I don't know, maybe the wheel is. But the iPhone changed everything about marketing. And the financial crisis changed everything about global economics because we still haven't paid off all that debt. And in fact, we've been accumulating more of it. Quantitative easing has completely changed the macroeconomic environment. And all of that economic turmoil boiled over into 15 years of global protest. So, that laundry list is Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party. followed by, in no particular order, Arab Spring, Yellow Vest, Me Too, 4 climate strikes, George Floyd, Brexit happened in the middle of all of that, and social media took off, particularly after 2005 with the IPO of Facebook. And social media, of course, brought in e-commerce, omni-commerce, social commerce, supposedly ruining our mental health all along the way. And then we ran into the pandemic and we were quarantined for 2 years, which torpedoed trust and civic sociability. So we've seen a huge rise in incivility since then. It's declined a little bit, but it's still higher than it was pre-pandemic. Work from home normalized. Who would have predicted prior to the pandemic that hybrid work styles would now be the way in which we work and educate people? Nobody would have predicted that. Influencers have taken center stage. Inflation spiked to levels that we hadn't seen in 4 decades. We actually thought we had that under control, which shoved interest rates up after a few decades of very cheap money, which created a couple of crises of its own. Populist movements have hijacked our politics. Wars broke out in the Ukraine and Middle East. Extreme weather has become routine. ChatGPT set off an AI gold rush that's remaking everything. An upturn in GLP uses is dousing appetites and cravings across all kinds of categories. And now we have a generational transition. Baby boomers finally, thank God, and I'm one of them, are kind of off the scene. You know, there's no more cultural overhang. There's a numbers overhang, but there's no more cultural overhang of baby boomers, which has, you know, by many accounts been the plague of Gen X and millennials. We've got a new generation coming along, Gen Z, that will grow up in a very different world than the hangover of the 1960s and the 1970s. So that's the first 25 years of this century. And there are a lot of unprecedented things in there that have given rise to these kinds of swings in global uncertainty in the business climate around the world. That's the experience of life for consumers. This is the world in which people are living. This is also the experience of the marketplace for brands. So brands are trying to manage their way through this. And we see this reflected in all kinds of things. For example, we see it in mental health. So the CDC tracks mental health among high schoolers and has found record high levels of persistent feelings of sadness or helplessness or anxiety among high school students, particularly among high school girls. It's half of all girls in high school, which to me is a stunning figure. In our monitor data, we actually asked Gen Z in the US what they believe, we gave them a list, things you believe will be influences in shaping your worldview of the future. Just think about your life, what's going to shape the future that you inherit. And tied with new technologies is one of the top 3 things mentioned was mental health. So mental health is as important to Gen Z and the way in which they think about their situations as new technologies. And so what does all this mean for consumers? Well, again, in our monitor tracking, we have seen a big shift in lifestyle values among consumers. So I'm not showing you any of the data here, but we have seen consumers increasingly say that the priorities for me right now are things about me. I lived through this period of time where it was all about saving the world. It's not that I want the world to go to hell in a handbasket, but I want brands to focus a little bit on me for a change. More me, less world. And the shift that we see, we have described as a selfward shift. What consumers are looking for from brands are ways in which they can cope with this volatile world around them. So people are saying, enough of this volatility, let me find some way in which I can carve out a space for myself that feels better. And so the opportunities here are all related to things about well-being. So health is a big issue for brands these days. Modern health is the way in which many FMCG companies are describing it to themselves nowadays. Experiences, spending on experiences has been higher than spending on products for a long time, but people are doubling down on experiences. And all things related to comfort. So sometimes I like to dig into comfort because there are a few interesting ads where brands are using sort of a new vocabulary to describe what's interesting about my brand. And the word they're using is the word boring. What's great about my brand is that it's boring. So PNC Bank came out with a campaign that they're still running. They launched the campaign as all those Silicon Valley banks were going out of business. You know, we had a little small sort of bank run because balance sheets got upside down for some of the Silicon Valley banks. And PNC Bank came out in the middle of that and said, you know what's great about us? We're a boring bank. We don't do any of that wild stuff. We don't take any of those wild risks. We don't expose your money to all that turmoil and volatility in the world around us. We're just a boring bank. And by being boring, you can get all of the interesting rewards in your lifestyle. So it's not like you have to live a boring life, but what you want is a boring brand. And interestingly enough, Heineken adopted the same vocabulary word a couple of years ago in a promotion it did during Milan Design Week, where it handed out 5,000 free phones. And the phones it handed out were old-fashioned flip phones, not the smartphones that are supposed to be ruining our mental health. There were these old-fashioned flip phones, and they called it the boring phone. You know what's interesting about this promotion? It's a boring phone that does not expose you to all the risk and all the turmoil in the world around us. SeatGeek did the same thing when Ticketmaster had their blow up with Taylor Swift at the beginning of her Eras tour. If you recall a lot of that, they just said, hey, you know what's great about our ticketing app? It just does what it's supposed to do. We don't do any of that other fancy stuff. We're just a boring ticket app. We do what a ticketing app is supposed to do. And there are lots of tourist destinations that are now advertising their appeal as being a boring place to be. There's a little video, 2.5-minute video out there put out by Visit Oslo. If you have 5 minutes just to waste one afternoon, go Google Visit Oslo on YouTube. And it's a guy who tells you all the reasons you should visit Oslo. And it's all about what a boring place Oslo is. And in fact,
Also safe.
And it's safe and boring. It's the same thing with Ocracoke Island. It's the same thing here with Mammoth Cave National Park. Let's see if I can read that. Mammoth Cave has come enjoy the experience that has disappointed millions of people for 225 years. That's what's great about Mammoth Cave National Park. It's boring. It's the kind of thing that can give you comfort in the middle of a volatile experience of life. And brands are offering that kind of a self-return and the benefit that they're promising for consumers. One of my favorite ads in this regard is Brother Printers in New Zealand. They're running a print and an outdoor campaign where they told you all the things they don't do. So I'm not going to save the environment. I'm not going to change the world. I'm not about the wider world. I'm not going to put you in first class or set trends or predict the future. In fact, it's a brand and their tagline is, it just works. We're just a boring old printer brand. We just do what we're supposed to do. We're like SeatGeek. We're just a better brand. That's what it's about, delivering category benefits for you in a way that can make you feel safe or take you away from some of the exposure to volatility and risk in the marketplace at large. And if that's not enough, a lot of brands are coming out and saying, hey, we've got other ways to improve your mood. So mood management, or as we call it, mood to order, is a big deal these days. So there are waters that promise they'll boost your mood. There are chocolate pills. There's psilocybin chocolate. Microdosing hallucinogenics is a big deal these days. Paints that are saying about improving your mood. Refrigerators that change colors. They can match the music you're playing, or you can program them to display a color that fits your mood. And if none of that is good enough, there's also something called a good patch. I don't know if it works or not, but the good patch promises within like 5 minutes, you can put a little patch on that will be absorbed through the skin that will either raise your energy level or calm you down, just changing your mood in the midst of this volatile world. So, some equanimity. Volatility is the first thing. But then I say to clients, what I think is actually the biggest macro force always is demographics. Demographics determine everything. Demographics set the stage or create the platform on which everything else is built. And the biggest demographic change in the past half century has been declining fertility rates. Period, bar none. Biggest thing that's happened in demographics. It has led to a slowing rate of population growth, which has macroeconomic implications, but it also has implications for household structure. So one of the structural consequences of slowing population growth has been a change in household structure. And the importance of that is that household needs come out of household structure. So what you need is determined by the kind of lifestyle you live. And the kind of lifestyle you live rests upon the foundation of the sort of demographics that you're a part of. And the first of these, there's sort of three of these to mention. The first of these is smaller households. So the chart that you see above is a chart taken from some OECD data that shows their projections of the growth in the percentage of one-person households in each of these OECD countries through the end of this decade. And you can see in France, it's growing by 75%. It's almost going to double. By the end of the decade, they're projecting it'll be 46% of all households in France. Think a little bit about that. Almost half of all households in France will be one-person households. It's 40% in Germany. The US, their projection is 28. Actually, the Census Bureau has come out with a more recent projection of 35% of all households in the US. And by the end of this decade, single households will be the largest type of household structure in the United States. Now, we have every brand in a grocery store that was built during a period of time in which the basic household structure was a traditional family. And yet, traditional families barely exist anymore. In fact, households with children, which used to be half of all households in 1960, are only a quarter of all households today. 60% of all households have no children in them. And no children in those households is a real shift in dynamic for a lot of brands. And so demographics are changing, and it's going to roll over brands whether they're ready for it or not. But that's not all that's going on. The other thing that's going on is that the world's getting older. So there are two charts here. This first chart shows age of childbirth, or first child, among women. So the blue lines are women in their 20s, and the red line is women 30 to 34. During the course of this century, these lines crossed, and the highest fertility rates worldwide, including the US today, are among women 30 to 34. So women 30 to 34 are having more babies and have higher fertility rates than women in their 20s. And that includes first-time births. So you think about an older mother with a child for the first time versus 10, 15 years ago, a woman in her 20s with a first-time child, very different kinds of household needs. And that's the future. So now you think about Gen Z and you go, well, what kind of world are they coming of age in? Well, they're coming of age with no experience of anything except volatility. They were born in this century. They've never known the great moderation. And they're coming of age when single households and child-free households are much more common, and their mothers are much older. And the other thing that they're going to have to deal with is, while baby boomers still don't have the cultural power that we used to have, we've still got numbers. So Gen Z is going to be this generation that comes of age with all these old people. We're just not dying off fast enough for Gen Z. And so when you look at the rate of growth in numbers among different age groups in the US population, the only one that's growing share is 65 plus. They're all growing numbers, but 65 plus is growing numbers so much faster that it is increasingly occupying a larger share of households. And the gap between 65 plus and younger households or younger adults is rapidly closing. What's the importance of this? Well, baby boomers have all the money. So if you look at consumer spending in 1989 versus 2023, and you just index one over the other, what you see is that spending on an index basis has gone down among younger consumers, and it's gone up among older consumers. So spending is becoming older as well. Boomers are carrying all this money with them. They have a disproportionate share of wealth. They have a disproportionate share of income, or at least spending. And that's where more critical mass will be found for brands in the future. So what are brands doing to adjust to this sort of aging consumer marketplace? And how then are they competing against younger consumers who are not going to have the same kind of buying power that they had in years past? This is just tracking with the aging of baby boomers. And then the final thing that I mentioned as a demographic factor for clients is later adulting. So here's a bunch of little itty bitty miniature charts about the age at which people go through various kinds of life stage transitions. So at the top, it's younger people. At the bottom, it's adults. So what you see at the top is younger people today are a lot less likely to drink or have sex in high school than we were. They are a lot less likely to have a driver's license or to be in the workforce. I think those two things are related. If you can't drive a car, it's hard to get to a job. But they are a lot less likely to have those kinds of life stage transitions behind them. And with adults, you see 25 to 35-year-olds at a percentage we haven't seen since 1940 living at home with their parents. Median age of first marriage is the highest ever measured in American history. The median age of first-time mothers, I've mentioned already, and the median age of first-time home buyers has gone from late 20s to now almost 40. So it's a decade older. So one of the other impacts of these demographic shifts is all of these life stage transitions are occurring at much later ages. So now you have a whole generation of young people, Gen Z, who are growing up without having done any of this stuff. So what kind of consumers are they as young people? And how do they compare to the way in which your brands have originally been developed and put into the market to begin with? So that's demographics. So we kind of covered the economy, kind of covered demographics. And the fifth thing that's going to roll over people is AI. So there's another little interesting video on YouTube that you can Google. There was a hackathon held by an investment firm in the UK called 11 Labs. And first place in their February hackathon was this little configuration of AI that they made a little 2-minute video of. So without getting into all the details, the phone there represents an AI agent for a person who's interested in renting some event space. The computer represents the AI agent of the hotel that has event space. So the AI agent of the person who wants to rent the space calls up the hotel. And the AI agent answers it and says, "Hello, how can I help you?" And the phone agent says, "You know, I'm an AI agent for so-and-so. We want to rent some space for an event. Do you have any space available?" And the computer, the AI agent for the hotel goes, "Oh, I'm an AI agent too. Would you like to switch to Gibberlink so we can have a more efficient conversation?" And then it sounds like two fax machines talking back and forth to one another. All of a sudden, these AI agents are talking in their own language. Now, one of the commentators, in one of the social threads, one of the commentators said, "Oh, congratulations on reinventing the fax machine," which is kind of an interesting comment, but completely missed the point. Because fax machines require human beings to operate and interpret. These are two agents doing this without any human beings involved at all. So think about a traditional shopping journey. Sure, we've all thought about this, right? But it's one where, you know, there's consideration and evaluations of option. You buy them, you use them, you go back into the shopper journey. Just a simplistic representation. At the top is what marketers have controlled in the past. At the bottom is what consumers have controlled in the past. So what happens when AI gets involved? Well, you know, assuming AI can live up to expectations, this is what happens. AI takes over everything. Human beings are no longer involved in the shopping process or in the evaluation process. AI is going to come up with consideration sets. In fact, AI might just even make the decision, buy it, complete the transaction, arrange delivery. That's what those two AI agents were doing that I showed you at the outset. You don't need a human being involved in that process. And then we'll use it. And we actually might think we enjoy it once we've used it, but AI is going to be monitoring our biometrics and our social feeds and all our buying behavior. And AI is going to say, nope, sorry, you didn't actually like it. You didn't get as much benefit out of it as you thought. And here's a better option. And if you think that's science fiction, that's what sleeping apps do today. You go to sleep, you wake up, you go, oh, great night's sleep. Then you look at your sleeping app and it says, did you sleep with 4 people last night? What was going on in the bed? You did not get a good night's sleep and you need some improvement in your regimen. That's the future of AI. It won't just control shopping. It's going to control every step of the process. And what it means is that it's going to become its own distribution channel. It's going to disintermediate brands completely. And brand trust could well become irrelevant. Because why do I have to worry about brands? I just have to trust my AI app to do the right thing and make the right decision. And if I trust my app, then I don't have to worry about anything that goes on in the background, which includes all of those brand options. So everything shifts to AI in this world where AI takes over. And in fact, Walmart has already said they're preparing for their next customer, the AI shopping app. They anticipate that in their future. And you can already use them today to disintermediate brands. So here's a brand that bought, some of this in-store promotional space inside a shopping cart. So you go to the aisle and you say, well, let me check this out. I see it. You pick it up, you scan it with the Yucca app, and it comes back with a recommendation that says, no way you should buy this. So whatever engagement consumers have had with brands in the past is going to be completely disintermediated by these kinds of AI-assisted apps. And they will be able to bring information into the shopping decision that has never been part of the shopping process before. They'll know everything about sustainability. They'll know everything about how you treat employees. They'll know what the diversity looks like in your board of directors. They might, this AI might even go out to some of these websites where employees talk about how good or bad a company is and use that information to score whether or not you should buy this brand. That's the AI future. And it's one in which brands have yet to sort of spend a lot of time thinking about, because right now we're spending all our time thinking about how we use AI to do marketing, not how consumers are going to use AI to do shopping. And the more fundamental change is going to be in the latter, how consumers change their shopping habits as a result of this kind of AI. And that will roll over your brand, whether you like it or not. So those 5 things: volatility, demographics, and AI. And then I say to clients, well, if you're feeling really bad, there are some things you can do for yourself. So let me tell you 5 things very quickly that are opportunities for you in the marketplace. So the first of these, and the 6th of these 10 things, is just solve some problems for people. So what you see plotted here is the University of Arizona. The University of Arizona has a center on customer service, and they have continued an occasional tracking that they've been doing since 2003 that they call the National Customer Rage Survey, RAGE. Have you heard of this? The National Customer Rage Survey. And they track a few things in this, but the important metrics are the percentage of people who say they've had a problem with a product or a service in the past year, the percentage of those who say they've tried to fix it, and the percentage of those people who say in the course of trying to fix it, I had so many problems getting it fixed that I became enraged, which is like the top rating on their anger scale. And when you do just the simple multiplication from their latest survey in 2023, it's half of all Americans are pissed off at some company over the course of each year. That's like 1 out of every 2 people you encounter walking down the street have been pissed off at some company over the course of the past year. Now, we all know the reasons why, right? A lot of customer service has been deprioritized. It's been handed off to technologies or to customer service systems that don't work very well. A lot of products, don't measure up to the kind of higher expectations that people have these days. So there are a lot of reasons. But what it means is there are a lot of problems that are going unfixed these days. So one of the opportunities is just to fix people's problems. And it doesn't even have to be problems that your brand caused. It could just be problems that people have. They come into the grocery store and they've got a problem with shopping. Well, how about you help them solve the shopping problem? Or you're trying to sell them an airline ticket, but they've got some problem with, planning their vacation. Solve the problem they've got with planning their vacation. Just be in the problem-solving business, because you know that kind of more often than not, in trying to fix it, they're going to get pissed off about it. So that's the first thing I say to people, just solve some problems. Second thing I say is add a little humor to your advertising. So we seem to have lost the ability to crack a joke in our ads or to have lighthearted ads anymore. So in our link tracking of ad copy testing, we do this all over the world for tens of thousands of ads every year. We content analyze everything so we can track the kinds of creative elements that are used in the ads that people are testing. And what we have seen since the turn of the century is a pretty dramatic decline in the percentage of these ads that are being tested in our system that incorporate some kind of creative element of humor across all kinds of formats for ads. So we've just lost the ability to take a lighthearted approach in the middle of a period of time in which people are living with a more volatile experience of life. So instead of offering people something that they can turn to and feel a little bit better about, we're just not communicating with them in the right way. So add some humor to your advertising. So I think those are two kind of somewhat trivial things, but nonetheless potentially important for some brands. A bigger thing is all about time. So this is one of the other lessons that was driven home during the pandemic, but has been rising for a number of years. And the headline here is to give people time back. So one of the things that a lot of our clients don't realize is the biggest ask we make of people is not their money, it's their time. We want people to watch our ads, browse our websites, wander through our stores, spend time thinking about our products, spend time thinking about our ads, talk about it with their friends, advocate it, post about it on social media. We want people to spend time with our products and services. That's the biggest ask we make of people. And yet, our tracking of personal resources in people's lives has shown over the past decade that time has kind of moved from the middle of the pack. A decade ago, people wanted more energy. Nowadays, it's far and away the number one thing that people want more of in their lifestyles. People want time. They want time back. They want that time to be rewarded. They want that time to be respected. They want more time in their lifestyles. And my favorite way of illustrating this, a lesson we learned from the pandemic, is to show this chart on golf. So this chart shows days of the week at the bottom, and the red bars show the amount of golf on average played on each day of the week pre-pandemic, and the blue bars show the amount of golf played on each day of the week post-pandemic. So what do you see? Well, we're playing a lot more golf in the middle of the week, and not at the expense of the weekend. We're just playing more golf. Why are we playing more golf? Because the pandemic, with its hybrid work styles and sending us home, gave us more control over our time. So now during the day, I can go out and catch 9 holes between my 10:30 Teams call and my 2:30 Teams call and catch up on work at night. I don't have to do it during the middle of the day and lose the opportunity to do something else that can give me some of these sort of self-ward benefits, if you will. So control over people's time was one of the biggest things that people learned in the pandemic. People learned I can have control over it without sacrificing the quality of work or income, and I can get more enjoyment out of my life in doing so. Control over time. So Jamie Dimon keeps issuing these edicts. You better come back to work or you're fired. And then everybody says, okay, not coming back. And why is that? Because people want more time back in their lives and they're going to fight for it. So these return to office full-time directives have not been effective in getting people into office full-time. And in fact, there is an organization called WFH Research, Work From Home Research, that tracks working from home since going back to the 1960s, but now really because the Census Bureau used to track it. Now they've tracked it since the pandemic, and we've kind of settled out into, on average, amount of work from home among industries where you can work from home, which are largely knowledge industries. It's not plumbing, but among knowledge industries, it's about 2 to 3 days a week are worked at home and 2 to 3 days are worked at the office. We've settled into new hybrid styles because time is so important to people.
As a golfer, you should incorporate a rage factor.
So they should just be different colors of red.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's, by the way, it's not just any kind of time, it's analog time. So there, analog is the new luxury. So people are going, okay, in this digital age, I'm going to use digital to give me more time back in my life. And I love AI because I can just have my AI agent call up that hotel and make those arrangements. And then I've got some extra time I can spend on the 19th hole after I finish my game of golf. So time is the big benefit for people of digital technologies, and in particular in the future, AI technologies. And what do people want to spend their time doing? They want to spend it on analog things. So we think digital is taking over people's lifestyles. Remember all that conversation pre-pandemic, digital's taken over, we're all worried about digital. All we had to do is look up from our screens, and what we saw was there's a record number of farmers markets. In fact, new residential housing developments incorporate farmers markets into the design these days because they know people want these analog activities and enjoyments. We were in the middle of food truck culture, festival culture, cafe culture, coffee shop culture, buy local still booming. We've all heard about vinyl records making a comeback, but physical books as well. Wooden toys, urban greenways transforming many cities. If you couldn't get an urban greenway, you could get a pop-up forest. Walkable neighborhoods command the highest price. It's all about analog entertainments. And Barnes & Noble over the past couple of years has been the retailer opening the most number of stores, new stores, because people have rediscovered the physicality of reading a physical book. There is sort of an experience to that is enjoying a new found heyday. And digital books have plateaued. We thought digital books were going to take over when the Kindle was introduced. What was that? 20 years ago. And in fact, it's just a small percentage of all books. And we're spending more time at home. So it's analog time and it's home time. I've been too lazy to actually go calculate the exact amount of time myself, so I'm just doing screenshots of other people's charts. But this is the American Time Use survey that's maintained by the BLS. And you can see even pre-pandemic, time spent out of home was declining. We're spending more time and doing more activities at home. And then, of course, with the pandemic, it dropped significantly and it stayed low. So we're spending a lot more time at home. So you say to retailers, home is the next big retail opportunity. You say to brands, how are you selling stuff to people in their homes? Because that's where people are. And it's not just homes per se, but it is kind of that concentric circle around the home. That sort of locality that is much more important in people's lifestyles these days. An opportunity that brands could take advantage of. Okay, 2 of these left. One of these is just economic, and this is sort of another depressing one, and that is we're increasingly moving to much more of an hourglass economy, a concept or a phrase that the Wall Street Journal introduced a few decades ago, but increasingly that's what we're seeing. So Moody's published this chart in the Wall Street Journal just a few months ago, in which they calculated that right now, the top 10% in the income distribution, top 10% of earners, today account for about half of all the consumer spending that goes on across all categories in the marketplace, up from the high 30s in the past. And there have been other analyses that have found the exact same thing. So for example, the Federal Reserve did an analysis looking at some numerator data, and they found that changes in the amount of spending kind of moved in concert across all income groups until 2022. with the spiking of inflation, and the yellow line at the top is the higher income group, and they have been carrying a bigger load of the economy ever since. Same thing is true in another Federal Reserve analysis. I won't get into all those numbers. Same thing, and I had to post my own analysis. I did my own analysis of the percentage of year-over-year increases in consumer spending accounted for by different quintiles. And the top quintile is now accounting for a much larger share of year-over-year spending increases as well. So increasingly, we've got an income bifurcated economy. And you see that especially in consumer packaged goods, where brands are going in one of two directions. They're either introducing a lot of premium offerings for higher income consumers, or they are going after value offerings for everybody else. And in the middle of all this, private label has enjoyed a new boom. And it's enjoyed a new boom because the middle class is shrinking, or at least people say so. Pew data shows the percentage of people who say they're in the middle class has been shrinking dramatically. And so the middle class and lower income, middle income and lower income consumers are feeling a lot of pressure, and private label has been right there to fill the gap. In fact, retailers don't even like the term private label anymore, speaking of terms. They like the term store brands because they have invested a lot in these brands, both the quality of these brands and the positioning of these brands. They're sort of not name brand products per se, but they are retail store brand products that are enjoying a greater share of the marketplace. And as you know, a lot of research shows that once name brand products lose market share to private label brands during economic downturns, when the downturn is over, they don't recover all of that share. About a third of that share stays with private label forever. And this has been true now for decades. So private label has been steadily building its share position over time. And of course, in recent years, that has accelerated dramatically. This is a real problem for name brand products. Yes?
Do you have a thought on this as it relates to, say, Costco/Kirkland?
Yeah. So Kirkland is a prime example of a retailer that has invested heavily in its brand. And it really is a compelling branded alternative to the other brands that they sell in their stores. And manufacturers know this. They know they're in competition with retailers for this. So it puts a different kind of pressure on this negotiation. But these economics are going to make that an even bigger deal going forward. Yeah. Okay. The last thing, and this is just something I like to have a little fun with, but I do think innovation we don't innovate as well as we used to across most consumer categories. There's a lot of data to this effect. Nielsen data shows it. Mintel data shows it. Name brand or radically new product innovations have dropped off dramatically. And there's a guy by the name of Alex Merrill who works at a UK agency called Epoch, who published a blog about 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, called The Age of Average, that went viral. And then a year later, he published The Age of Average Part 2. So if you haven't seen that, I'd recommend go checking that out. His basic thought was, in all the work they do, at Epoch and the work they see at competitive agencies, there has become this kind of visual brand homogenization. He just says all brands look alike these days. And the reason he says is because all agencies use the same processes to create ads. So they all wind up in the same place. They use the same research. They use the same brainstorming agencies. They get the same consulting advice. They come up with ads and brands that all look alike. And by the way, AI is likely to worsen that problem because AI is going to democratize all the best practices. So now everybody can come up with the best car. And I like this illustration because there's another principle in here as well. So you look at these car silhouettes and you go, well, they pretty much look all alike. Well, why is that? It's because the law of physics applies to every car. So if you're designing a car for best gas mileage, there's only one way to design it. The law of physics is not different for Ford than it is for Toyota. So they're all going to look alike. So there's the paradox. They're all better quality. They all are better quality products. But the difference between them has shrunk. And that's occurred in every category. Products in every category these days are better than they were in the past. And once a particular brand finds out a better way to do something, competitors don't just go, oh, well, they found out the best way to do it. I guess I'll just quit. Competitors go, I'm going to do it too. So now everybody's doing the same thing. So as quality has gone up, the difference between brands has shrunk. It's kind of this paradox of quality. So you see both of these things kind of illustrated here. And the interesting thing about Alex's blog post, and I've only got a few of these, he's got all of these kinds of collages across different kinds of categories, including things like Airbnb listings, movie posters, models, social media photos. They all look alike. They all have the same kind of design look. So all toothbrushes look alike or are presented alike in the ads these days. All personal care products look alike. All coffee shops look alike. One coffee shop figured out the best way to create a customer experience, and every other coffee shop's going, I'm not gonna mess with perfection. I'm gonna try and compete some other way, but I'm gonna be the same. Now, one of the implications of this is brands, in the process of all becoming alike, have pursued relevance to the exclusion of difference. So they've said, the best way to do things is the best way to do things. So that's going to be more relevant to consumers. People want a car with better gas mileage. And I don't care if my car looks exactly like every other car. So I'm willing to sacrifice difference in order to get more relevance. But of course, what really drives brand value and brand growth is not relevance, it's actually difference. It's something unique about your brand that makes you stand out from the crowd. Oh, by the way, before I was going to deliver that sermon, I was just going to say, in 2017, a designer noticed the exact same thing about brand logos. And why is that? Why is that? Because there are only certain fonts that are readable on handheld devices. And so every brand needs to use those fonts in order to be readable on a handheld device. And so all these special fonts, are hard to read on mobile devices. And so these kind of logos have all become more alike. So all the logos are better, but now there's less difference between them. At any rate, then it's the little sermon about being different. And in our research, we just went out and asked consumers this little simplistic question, and about just under two-thirds say most brands seem all the same to me, and it's a little bit higher among younger consumers. So a little bit of evidence of that. There's actually another tracking we have in our Brand Z research that we haven't done in the last couple of years, but it's a brand clarity metric. There's an exercise we take respondents through to see if the difference between brands is clear to them, and brand clarity had been shrinking over the course of 16 or 17 years before we quit doing that tracking. All brands are increasingly the same, but we know that when you add innovative behaviors to meaningful difference, you actually get brands that grow faster on average. So this is just observational data from our Brand Z research over the past 20 years. But brands that are merely meaningful different do have a higher growth rate than brands that underperform on meaning or difference. But when you add innovative behaviors to that, which means that these brands are also engaged in introducing innovations that are kind of breakout innovations, the brand growth rate is much higher. And then final slide, one of my favorite studies that a student of Jan Benedict Steenkamp did, Leon Lamy, who now teaches in Belgium, was a study on private label share gains during economic downturns. So there were two big publications that she had related to that. So the first one showed that phenomenon I described a little bit earlier, which she called asymmetric share gains, which is that when economic downturns occur and people trade down to private label, then the economy turns around and people go back to name brands. A lot of people have traded down to private label and they go, hey, this isn't really too bad. I'm just going to stay here. And so it turns out that private label has a certain kind of share gain that it never gives up. And you can see that accumulate over time. So she did some analyses looking at 30 or 40 years of purchasing data across a number of countries and found this asymmetric share gain thing. So the answer to competing with private label during downturns is not to say, I'll wait it out and get my share back, because you won't get it all back. The answer is I have to stop it in its tracks. I have to stop it before it ever occurs. So then the next question she investigated was, how do you stop it? And so she did another analysis, and this included some data that she gotten from Kantar across 3 markets. And she was asking the question, what mitigates private label success? So she looked at all the factors, whatever you could think of. More advertising spending, cutting prices, promotions and deals of all sorts, and innovation. And she classified innovations into different categories, qualitative categories of innovation, and found that the thing that stops private label share gains the best is what she referred to as significant innovation. And when I talk to clients about this, I say, in other words, you give people more reasons to buy during a downturn as opposed to fewer reasons to buy. Because people, this is my simplistic representation of it, so you can correct me, but this is how I think about it. People always shop the same way. They have a budget, so they decide, what am I going to spend money on and what am I going to save money on? Spend and save. Everything's got to go in one bucket or the other. And the things that go in the spend money bucket are things that have enough value for me to spend money on them or spend extra on them. And I'm going to save money on everything else so I can spend money on this stuff. It doesn't matter whether it's a recession or good economic times, it's the same process. So you get to a recession and consumers are going, I gotta scrutinize more intensively what I put in the spend money bucket. And then you start taking value out of your brand. You shrinkflation it, you communicate the wrong message about it with all your promotional activity, and people are going, oh, I guess this isn't one of these things that has enough value to keep it in the spend money bucket, so I'll put it in the save money bucket. And then when they do, they discover they liked it, the alternative pretty well, and they stick with the alternative. So the way you counter that, says Leanne Lamy, is you add significant innovations to your brands during downturns that can't be copied by private label. They're copyrighted or they're too dramatic a breakthrough, and you wind up giving people more reasons to buy, not fewer reasons to buy. And that's the kind of innovation that's required these days. And I would usually show some other sort of data to say that's not the kind of innovation that's occurring right now. And that means you need to make bolder bets. So with that, I would wrap it up to rapturous applause. And lots of applause from Kantar for doing more work.
That was great, and we should definitely publicize this with the video of this. It's a fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.